October 2025. Emari Air Base, Estonia. 11 kilometers from the Gulf of Finland, 40 kilometers from the Russian border. Midnight, and the base was quiet in the way that a cocked weapon is quiet. Everything loaded, everything ready, nothing moving. 12 F-35A Lightnings II from the 48th Fighter Squadron, deployed from RAF Lakenheath, sat in reinforced hardened shelters under amber security lighting. Their low observable coatings absorb the light rather than reflecting it, turning $80 million aircraft into dark geometric shapes that seem to pull the surrounding darkness toward them. The pilots assigned to Quick Reaction Alert were resting in the alert facility, connected to the tactical picture via secure data terminals that could put the full operational airspace picture in front of them within seconds of standing up. Below the flight line, the Tactical Operations Center ran continuously. The AN/FPS 117 long-range radar swept a 240 nautical mile arc of Baltic airspace, one complete rotation per second, the return data streaming at terabyte per hour throughput into CyberNet. The secure routing infrastructure that connected the TOC's displays to every linked platform in the operational zone. Every radar contact, every emitter signature, every IFF response within that arc was visible simultaneously to the ground operators, to the E-3 Sentry AWACS aircraft holding a figure-8 orbit overhead, and to the F-35s on alert whose sensor fusion systems were already integrating the feed. Link 16 network latency under 100 milliseconds. The picture across all platforms was effectively simultaneous, 1 ping per second. The steady pulse of a system that does not sleep. At 0003 hours, a sensor operator's display registered an anomaly. 6 contacts, altitude 500 feet, speed 120 knots, no IFF signal, no transponder, no identification of any kind. They had appeared without any preceding detection. No launch event captured, no thermal bloom from a ground vehicle, nothing that indicated where they came from. They were simply there, low and fast, already inside the outer radar floor, heading directly toward the center of the base on a line that passed over the F-35 shelters. The AN/T PQ-53 counterfire radar, a system built around gallium nitride arrays capable of resolving radar cross-sections as small as 0.01 square meters, roughly equivalent to a large bird in flight, had already flagged the contacts 0.5 seconds before the human operator registered the anomaly on the display. Its AI classification algorithm, trained against thousands of threat profiles, had matched the signature set, SHARD 136 variants. Iranian-designed, Russian-employed, carrying 20-kilogram warheads with inertial and GPS-resistant guidance. Reconnaissance correlation from an Orlan-10 UAV detected operating ahead of the swarm confirmed the targeting architecture. A forward observer directing the attack from above, passing course corrections to the inbound weapons. The kill chain activated without a voice command. Data to ground defense systems, 2 seconds. The outer ring responded first. 4 M115-1A, 1H MMWVs belonging to the 31st Air Defense Artillery Brigade were positioned at calculated intervals around the base perimeter. Their automatic turrets completed a 180-degree rotation in 3 seconds as the targeting data arrived via Link 16. The LU-106 launcher covers lifted. FIM-92. E-Stinger missiles reached operational temperature. The 2025 upgraded dual infrared and ultraviolet seeker requires the detection array cooled to minus 196 degrees Celsius to function at peak sensitivity, a process the revised cooling system accomplishes in 2 seconds. In the Baltic cold, that was already done. What makes the FIM-92E meaningfully different from earlier Stinger variants is not its speed, which remains Mach 2.2, or its range, which covers 4.8 kilometers. It is the dual spectral seeker's ability to discriminate between a real target and a decoy flare with 95% reliability. Earlier seekers could be defeated by countermeasures at a rate that made massed flare deployment a viable survival tactic. The 2025 seeker treats flares as background noise. The targeting data feeding these systems did not come from their own organic radar. It came from the distributed aperture system of an F-35A on patrol overhead, synthesized against the AN/FPS 117 ground feed and routed through Link 16. The aircraft's sensors becoming the ground unit's eyes across a data link spanning kilometers in under a tenth of a second. The Air Force was providing targeting to the Army before the Army's own radar had completed its first engagement quality track. 2 Stinger missiles left their launchers. The thrust vector control nozzles adjusted in flight as the E-3 AWACS fed updated position data during the terminal phase. The proximity fuses activated at 10 meters distance from the lead drones, not on direct impact, which against a composite construction target might produce an incomplete kill, but in a burst fragmentation pattern that saturates the airframe's control surfaces and guidance electronics simultaneously. 2 red contacts vanished from the display. Debris confirmation, positive. No warhead detonation on the ground. Cost of those 2 Stingers, $450,000 each. Cost of the drones they destroyed, approximately $50,000 combined. Cost of the F-35s sitting in the shelters beyond them, over $960 million for the full complement. The math does not require explanation. 4 contacts remaining, and here the engagement became more difficult because the 4 surviving drones adapted. They had not been programmed to fly in a straight line until intercepted. They descended below 300 feet, dropping into the terrain clutter layer where pine trees and ground return compete with small airborne contacts for radar resolution. Their speed increased to 150 knots. Active electronic countermeasures activated, attempting to spoof the IFF interrogation signals that ground systems use to maintain track continuity. They spread laterally, no longer a compact formation presenting a single targeting solution, but 4 separate contacts moving on diverging headings through terrain-masked corridors. This is the doctrinal evolution that has made the Shahed family increasingly dangerous since its first operational deployments. The early variants flew in straight lines at constant altitude. Terminal operators and air defense crews developed effective procedures against that profile. The 2025 variants incorporate post-launch waypoint updates from the forward Orlan 10 observer, allowing course corrections that exploit gaps identified in real time. The drone is not just flying a pre-programmed route, it is being navigated around detected defenses. The Cooperative Engagement Capability, CEC, is the architectural response to exactly that problem. It fuses electro-optical data from the F-35's distributed aperture system with the AN/TPQ-53's ground radar returns, filling the terrain-masked blind spots that neither system can see independently with a composite picture that both can act on. Where the pine trees created a radar shadow, the F-35's passive infrared sensors looked through it from above. Where the infrared picture was ambiguous, the ground radar's Doppler filtering resolved the contact against the clutter. The integrated picture showed 4 targets. Their headings, airspeeds, and projected impact points on the runway and F-35 shelters were calculated with 25 seconds remaining. The Phalanx land-based weapon systems deployed at each corner of the runway received the targeting package. 4 LPW-S Block 1B units, maintained under a $279 million service contract awarded to Raytheon in July 2025, are not the naval Phalanx system simply moved to ground. The 2025 revision includes AI clustering algorithms that allow simultaneous processing of up to 20 distinct targets, a turret rotation rate of 45 degrees per second, 10 times faster than World War II-era anti-aircraft traversal mechanisms, and gallium nitride radar arrays that maintain 90% track probability through Baltic fog conditions at 90% humidity. Each unit holds 1,550 rounds of 20mm HEIT-SD ammunition in an auto-loading drum that recycles in 10 seconds. The M61A, 1 Vulcan cannon at its core, cycles at 4,500 rounds per minute. 4 systems, 4 corners, interlocking fields of fire calculated through IFF interrogation to prevent overlap on each other's sectors. The targeting data from the JADC2 node arrived at all 4 fire control systems simultaneously. Latency eliminated by edge computing processing that runs the final targeting solution locally rather than passing it back through the network for calculation. The F-35's multifunction advanced data link fed real-time target vectors as the contacts moved through their final approach. The guns tracked before they fired, turrets moving ahead of the targets to the predicted intercept point rather than chasing them reactively. The first cannon fired from the northern position, a 75-round burst at 4,500 rounds per minute. Not a continuous stream, but a precisely calculated salvo, the fire control system, having determined the exact round count, needed to place sufficient density in the intercept cone. The HEIT-SD rounds fuse in proximity to the target rather than on direct contact, each detonation producing a shrapnel cloud optimized for the cross-section of a small composite airframe. Drone 3 disintegrated at 800 meters. The radar had predicted a 50G evasive turn and moved the muzzle to where the drone was going to be rather than where it was. The second gun engaged Drone 4 through a 1-kilometer crossing shot. The burst timed to the target's lateral velocity with a muzzle velocity of 3,000 feet per second, allowing the fire control system to thread the projectile stream through the precise airspace the drone had to occupy to maintain its approach heading. The contact disappeared mid-maneuver. The last two drones climbed. A terminal pop-up maneuver, gaining altitude in the final 500 meters to attack from above, angling the warhead strike onto the less armored upper surfaces of the hangars rather than the reinforced blast-resistant walls. It is a documented tactic. The AI system running the LPWS fire control had been trained on it, specifically flagged from Orlan 10 operational data collected in prior Baltic incursions. Probability of high climb terminal maneuver, 99.9% assigned before the engagement began. Cannons 3 and 4 elevated simultaneously, forming converging fire arcs above the runway. A combined 150-round salvo reached both drones within the same second. The warheads cooked off in the air, chain detonations above the tarmac rather than on it, the blast energy dissipating upward into open sky rather than into structures or aircraft below. The sky over Emari lit briefly, not with the violence of an attack, but with the brief, sharp light of threats converted to debris at altitude. Then dark again. An MQ-9 Reaper at 15,000 feet overhead completed a debris survey pass. Thermal imaging, no ground impacts, no structural damage, no casualties. 18,000 rounds of ammunition expended, 6 Shard variants destroyed, 12 F-35s intact in their shelters. The pilots on quick reaction alert had not needed to start their engines. In the TOC, the Link 16 network updated. 6 confirmed intercepts, airspace secure. The green scan lines on the display continued their regular sweep. Pull back from the individual engagement and look at what it actually demonstrated. The drone operators running this attack from Kaliningrad had a reasonable expectation that 6 low-altitude, terrain-hugging, ECM-equipped contacts would present a detection and engagement problem sufficient to allow at least partial penetration. That assessment was not unreasonable based on how single-system air defense performs against that profile. Against a system where the F-35's overhead sensors fill the terrain gaps that ground radar cannot see, where the ground radar's Doppler processing resolves what the optical sensors ambiguate, where the fire control solution is calculated and distributed to 4 independent weapons simultaneously before any of them fires around. The terrain masking that defeats a single radar is irrelevant because the architecture does not rely on any single radar. This is what the 82% increase in Baltic drone incursion activity documented in the third quarter Defense Department report was testing. Not the individual capabilities of any specific system. The integration seams, the latency points, the handoff gaps between Air Force sensors and Army shooters. The moment where one network ends and the next begins. This engagement found no exploitable seam. The data traversed those boundaries faster than the drones traversed the airspace, and the fire control solutions were waiting at the terminal end before the targets arrived. Every failed attack in this corridor gets analyzed. The Orlan 10's relayed telemetry, the ECM activation timing, the pop-up maneuver parameters, all of it is recoverable from the signatures the attack generated while it was being destroyed. The next variant will be built around what this one revealed. The kill chain defending against that variant is already being updated around what this engagement confirmed. That cycle does not stop. The question is not whether the next wave will be more sophisticated. It will be. The question is whether the integration margin, the advantage that comes from fusing more data sources faster with fewer latency gaps, compounds faster than the threat can adapt to close it. Emari held. The Baltic trade corridors that carry a significant fraction of Northern European commerce stayed open. The F-35s that would have been needed to reopen a contested airspace if the base had been degraded never left the ground. The cannons cooled. The radar continued its 1-second sweep. Somewhere over the Baltic, the debris was still settling. What is your read on the long-term trajectory here? Does the integration advantage hold as drone swarms scale up in numbers and autonomy? Or does the math eventually shift toward the attacker when the volume exceeds what any fixed defensive architecture can cycle through? Put your thinking in the comments.